Hi, everyone. Welcome to the eighth office hour for the MOOC on environmental security and sustaining peace. We have today the core faculty of the MOOC, and I'll ask everyone to introduce themselves, provide their name, title, their area of specialty, and to share, maybe we'll first do that, and then we'll talk about the most interesting or surprising thing that we've learned as we develop this MOOC. David, would you like to start?
Sure. Thanks very much, Carl, and welcome everybody. David Jensen. I'm the head of environmental policy in the post-conflict and disaster management branch of UNEP, and I'm also co-directing the MapX platform, which you had experienced in a few of the lectures. Great to be here. Thank you very much.
Erica?
Good morning. This is Erica Weinthal. I'm a professor at the Nicholas School of the Environment and have been teaching classes on environment, conflict, and peace building for quite some time, and have been part of the MOOC since its inception, and so happy to be part of this conversation today.
Excellent. And Richard?
Hi, everybody. Richard Matthew. I'm a professor at the University of California, Irvine, where I direct a research center, the Blum Center for Poverty Alleviation. And my research is in really sort of two areas. One, looking at the connections among environmental stress, conflict, and poverty, and the other co-developing visualization tools to help people, especially low-resource communities that have extreme vulnerability to extreme events.
And I am Carl Brook. I direct international programs at the Environmental Law Institute. We are unfortunately unable to have Mark Levy join us. He is on the final approach to New York, flying in from Lagos on a delayed flight. He had hoped to be able to join us. Mark is Deputy Director of Season at the Earth Institute at Columbia University, and he will, he's been sending us responses to some of the questions electronically, so we'll try to share those as we go along. So maybe if we could start with the most interesting or surprising thing that you've learned while helping develop the MOOC. Maybe actually start with Mark on this. Mark says, I've tended to approach these questions from a primarily academic perspective. It was pleasantly surprising and very interesting to realize how much knowledge generation is taking place among the practitioners. Developing the MOOC required bringing together a group of faculty spanning academic and practitioner backgrounds and spanning a great range of both scholarly and practitioner experience. In doing so, a lot of knowledge generated through critically reflective practitioners came into focus. In many ways, the practitioners now passed the scholars in turning out usable knowledge. And we'll open up for anyone who wants to jump in on the question now. What's the most interesting thing that you've learned in developing the MOOC?
Can I go, Carl?
By all means.
Yeah, I think Mark is exactly right. I think from my side, the first lesson was just how hard it was to scope the MOOC and to take such a huge body of knowledge and try to compress it into something that was accessible and usable. And I don't know if students are aware, but the first draft of the outline, I think it was about 3 times as long as the one we delivered. And when we first reviewed it, we realized that it was going to be very difficult to develop and to actually implement. And so we cut it down by 1/3. And I think that was the right choice. I think we could probably even cut it down a bit more. But I think that was the first lesson, was just how much and how large this field is, and how can we, how effective did we do to compress it, to structure it, to bottom line everything, and to really deliver something, as Mark said, that was a good mix of sort of academic theory and practitioner orientation. So I would really love to hear if we succeeded. From a lot of the feedback that I have so far, it sounds like we did. But any further feedback in terms of the next iteration would be really fantastic.
I mean, I'll just jump in for me, being engaged in the MOOC is really about bridging that tension or the gap between the theoretical literature and practice. And I think what was really important in designing the MOOC was how to have theory and practice in conversation with each other, and that it's not always as easy as one would think, largely just because of the nature of the questions that we ask from an academic side versus from those that are working in the field who need, suggestions that can translate into concrete policies, whereas sometimes those in an academic setting will say, well, let's step back and let's look at it, and we really can't generate recommendations or prescriptions. And so trying to really confront that tension between theory and practice.
I mean, I guess I can say that people have been studying peace and conflict for literally thousands of years, but looking at peace and conflict in relation to the environment is something that really aggressively began only after Rio and the end of the Cold War, so only for the past 20-odd years. And to my mind, it was amazing how much we have learned and how much of a contribution academics and practitioners have made to understanding the conflicts that are taking place these days through this body of work. Right? So bringing it all together just reminded me of how much we have, how far we have traveled from the early sort of intuitions and hypotheses 20 years ago.
For me, the most challenging thing, sorry, go ahead, David.
I was just going to tag on just how much demand there is to share what's going on at the field. That's what impressed me as well. How much people wanted to engage and share their stories, and how much communities and practitioners on the ground really wanted best practices and start deploying these things on the ground. So the demand and the actual scaling of some of these solutions was fantastic and really exciting.
For me, I think the challenge, the most challenging thing was trying to work with a 8 to 10, maybe 12-minute time slot where you're trying to communicate something meaningful. And it's coming back to this what you were saying, David, about bottom lining. When you talk about the resource curse or about conflict resources or about livelihoods, there's so much to say, and trying to figure out what are the core lessons or the core things that we want to communicate. And I think the related to that is that often there's a certain amount about dynamics. Maybe this is kind of going back to the academic practitioner discussion everyone was highlighting. But it's one thing to understand the dynamics and to kind of say these are three concerns, but then to flip it around and say, so what does this mean if somebody wants to do something? And translating that understanding of dynamics into something that's actionable, that's harder than it often one would think. Anything else on what we've learned in producing the MOOC? Okay, maybe we could move on to the question of kind of take a step back. Speaking about bottom lining, if students could take away one lesson from the MOOC, what do you hope it is? Maybe we could start with you, Erica.
Ooh, that goes against everything as an academic we try to say, in that, often, not trying to generalize too much. So for me, things that I think were important in generating knowledge through the MOOC was that many of these cases are context specific, and it's really, and I think the case studies clearly showed that, and that was why it was so important for us to both have a balance between some of the high level, theoretical discussions around just the literature on the conflict cycle and peace and the resource curse and just transparency and issues like that. But they play out differently in different cases, and one should never negate the particular histories of a particular region. I think this came out really well in the cases that were discussed, ranging from Colombia to Afghanistan to Sierra Leone to the Jordan River Basin, that one should be cautious in trying to generalize too much without really having a thorough understanding of what were the particularities of each case, be it the constitution, the constellation of different groups within a country, the way different natural resources may have played a role in the conflict, either as causing grievances or helping to fuel the conflict, to serving as an entry point for helping to bring different members of the community together. And so really paying attention to the particularities of a particular case. I'll stop there.
Richard?
I mean, I think that there's lots of things I hope people will take away. Clearly, one of them, though, is that environmental stress and the sort of role of natural resources in our lives is sort of a very pervasive type of pressure that people are experiencing in different ways around the world. But there's no doubt that certain forms of this of environmental stress are mounting, and there's, when we look at today's world and we see the largest number of sort of displaced people in modern history, and we know that a lot of them are part of that displacement is due to things like drought and flood and so on. We know that we are focusing on something that is contemporarily very, very important. And absolutely, as Erica pointed out, it will play out in different ways in different parts of the world, but it will always be adding some sort of stress, some sort of challenge, some sort of need to understand it and figure out how to accommodate it. And so this type of course, I think, reminds us, and people are doing similar things in areas like public health and poverty alleviation, of just how important environmental factors are if we want a full understanding of events and if we want to have a full toolkit of responses to things.
Yeah, Carl, can I jump in?
Please.
I think one of the key messages from my side is not to necessarily sell this as a risk-based or a threat-based problem, but really focus in on the opportunities and solutions that are available now to combat some of these issues. And what I mean to say is there are a whole series of tools in the toolbox now that we didn't have before. We've got a lot more data than we ever had before. We've got artificial intelligence. We've got new technologies like blockchain. We've got mobile technologies. I think there's a lot of opportunity on the horizon to start tackling these issues in new ways with this kind of technology. And I really think that the positive aspects and the opportunities have to come out. And so I would say to practitioners, the doom and gloom side of this equation doesn't motivate people. And I'd say solution narratives and opportunities really do motivate people. So try to figure out, what is that solution landscape? How can you pick an entry point and start with some kind of engagement, and then learn lessons and iterate over time. So don't try to boil the ocean all at once. Pick something, work on it, learn that context, iterate, and then expand.
It seems like this is a message maybe also for academics or researchers to think not only to research what the problems are, but to look at how effective different solutions might be. So kind of this is a message that's relevant both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the complementary message on this is like the metrics are important, and that's the next big hurdle I think we have to address is how do you measure peace dynamics, and how do you measure the contribution of natural resources and environmental cooperation to local level peace building or to conflict risk. So I think with this new technology landscape and some of these new data points and using AI, we need to be looking at this question: how do we actually see those trends, and how do we know where there are problems, and how do we know where things are working? So I think that's a big opportunity that we need to seize on.
And Mark Levy, I think, highlights a very similar point here. He says that it remains true that knowledge about problems is stronger than knowledge about solutions. This is a knowledge gap that can be filled, but it can only be filled if everyone working in this field dedicates a part of what they do to filling it. Everyone can play a constructive role in this regard. And if no one does, we won't get better at designing solutions. So I think that ties in, very nicely to a number of things that we've been saying about practitioners and academics, and also about the solutions and problems. But for me, I guess the one thing that I would take away is that I'd like students to take away, if it was only one thing. I'm hoping it's more, but it just, if there's one thing that they can take away, it's thinking about these dynamics in the broader context. And it's especially in the context of the conflict life cycle. So often people are analyzing a very specific dynamic at a very specific point in time, or a specific resource, or their mandate is to go in and do this at this time, and then it's handed off to somebody else. And there is not always a lot of thought paid to what happened before or what comes next. And I think if we can think more about the dynamics in that broader context of the conflict life cycle, will be more effective, and both in understanding and in being able to act.
I guess, Carl, one of my questions is, how do we start using the technology, in particular social media, to really help practitioners share those best practices and those stories? So how can we start collecting these best cases and really catalyzing the sharing of that between these practitioners? And one of the great things about the course is we had over 150 countries represented, with thousands of examples and thousands of cases between them. And so I'm really keen to leverage that community and start helping them share more systematically and really capturing good practice going forward.
Seems like a point for further discussion.
Or maybe you could talk about the Environmental Peace Building Association.
Sure. I was hoping to save that for later, but we are very proud to announce the launch of a new professional environmental peace building association. Erica is one of the vice presidents, Richard is another, David's on the board, and I am the president. That we have a wonderful board that extends 11 individuals, and we're hoping to expand the association substantially to provide this an institutional framework for everyone to come together and share these experiences, both kind of on a day-to-day basis, as well as through more traditional formal means, including a regular conference and eventually a journal and webinars. And so trying to provide a forum where people from different disciplines can come together, share and learn and exchange. I don't know if any of you would like to add to what we're hoping to do, and why people should join.
Sure, I'll jump in. I mean, one of the reasons why we're so excited about formalizing, in many ways, what has been a growing network of researchers, practitioners, students, policymakers who are interested in this topic of environmental peace building broadly, is to capture the knowledge that is being generated and to share it through a knowledge platform that is going to take many forms, some of which will be online mechanisms, but also bringing people together through various workshops and conferences to have, to engage in conversation about best practices, lessons learned, where there's still gaps in our knowledge that we need to generate additional research, but also, as David's been mentioning, how do we capture those success stories, and how do we make sure that they're moving between different communities? So one of the things that I think we all would really welcome is hearing from the larger community about what you would like to see in various forms of workshops, small conferences, large conferences, online mechanisms such as webinars, to continue to generate this knowledge about environmental peace building, but in a way that can be transferred among different practitioners and those that are engaged in the field, virtually and in person.
David or Richard, do you have anything else to add on the association?
I mean, I think that because it's being launched now, and because there's such sort of global interest in this set of relationships, these relationships intuitively make sense to a lot of people. We're in a sort of unique position of bringing the sort of the research world and the practitioner world together in a way that will sort of co-develop this association and try and make it beneficial to everybody. So I think that the more participation, the more people sort of say it would be helpful if we had this, or if we knew this, or how do you access this, or what's the best practice here, or can you do something on MapX? Can you? We really are interested in that. The easier it will be for us to develop into a resource that is useful to the entire planet in a variety of ways. And so it's really, really exciting to see this level of interest. I mean, 10,000 people taking a MOOC, that's just a huge number of people.
I think going back to the first question, that's my biggest surprise. This is something that David was pushing us, and he did an amazing job reaching out to people and really building a lot of support. But he was aiming for 10,000, and I thought we'd be lucky to have 2,000. So that was a real surprise.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree. That was a pleasant surprise. We hit that number. I'll just about hit that number. For me, the key thing though is those are virtual relationships, that 10,000 and those relationships that were built inside the class. We need to move that into reality now, and we really need to help people take those digital relationships and make them real outside in the real world. And I think that's what the association can really do, is to help people meet face to face, establish real relationships, and take those into the field where they can start deploying good practices, sharing lessons, and having a real impact. So if the MOOC is going to have any success, it's going to be basically transferring that 10,000 into relationships in the real world.
And so to help those 10,000 sign up, the way that you can join as of today, this really is a moment here, that going to environmentalpeacebuilding.org, where many of you have been collecting information and seeing different things. Go to environmentalpeacebuilding.org, and there's a membership tab, and that will have all the benefits of membership and the rates, and walk you through basically how to join. So we're at the ground floor, and we're hoping that you will be joining us as founding members of this new association. We think there's a lot of value in this, and we're very excited about it.
Carl, maybe I'll just say that as a supplement to the actual Environmental Peace Building Association, we will be also making MapX available to the group, and we'll be moving in 3 directions with MapX.
Sorry. This is what happens when you come to your office.
No worries. So we'll be moving in 3 directions with MapX. The first is aggregating big data from multiple sources. The second is leveraging artificial intelligence against that big data. And the third will be looking at smart contracting and blockchains and how we can apply the smart contract concept into natural resource contracting.
Excellent. And that information, is that going to be made available on the MOOC platform, or how should people expect to see that?
We will be issuing an email, basically a sign-up email, and we'll also be creating an announcement on the MOOC platform, as well as hopefully in the Environmental Peace Building Association website.
So, talking a little bit more about how people can engage, wondering if you could talk about the questions of many of the people who are taking the MOOC are students. Any advice that you would have for students who are considering applying to grad school to study these subjects, or how to get experience? What would you suggest for people who are still young and wanting to move into this space, aside from joining the association?
I would say, obviously pick a project at the field level, but find a community or a number of communities that want to go on a journey with you. So make sure it's grounded in the needs of a particular community. Make sure they're on board and make sure they're steering it. And if you can find that kind of a situation, the amount of learning you will do will just be phenomenal. So don't do something in isolation. Try to find, in a community to engage with, where you can understand the social relationships, understand the relationship to natural resources, and really try to work through a problem and find a solution that is very germane to their livelihoods and their social resilience. And don't be afraid to fail. Try something. Come up with a grand design for your project. Try it. And if it fails horribly and crashes and burns, pick yourself up and start again. Iterate. There's a lot of really good practices coming out of Silicon Valley in terms of agile development, which can be applied to natural resource management and projects in the natural resource field. I mean, we call it adaptive management. They call it agile development, but it's ultimately the same thing. It's making sure you're understanding the context, adopting your product or your service relative to the needs, and having a continuous loop of information where you're able to collect the data and then augment your approach relative to the data. So definitely don't be afraid of failure. Take a risk, try your best. If it doesn't work, pick yourself up and try again and try again and try again and try again. Eventually something will work. And the lessons you learn from failure will probably be more important than the ones you take out of success.
Assuming you keep going.
Assuming you keep going.
Okay, I'll jump in. I think there's two things I would probably recommend. One is to network, and the other is to put yourself in a position where you're outside of your comfort zone. And when I talk about networking, I mean, this is probably the most important thing anyone can do, especially when you want to explore a new field. Talk to people. Just reach out, ask them for informational interviews, learn about the field, learn about the different types of positions that exist. A lot of associations are creating mechanisms for junior scholars, junior practitioners to come together at events just to network, because that really is the best way of meeting people in a similar position, but also generating ideas. It may be through those initial meetings that you'll come up with a new strategy or a new idea of creating an organization to deal with a particular issue, be it, certification of a certain product or trying to create a new online platform. And in some ways, the way we all came together was many years ago through initial conversations and meetings that have generated a number of products along the way. And then the other thing is, I tell my students, increasingly, you just need to put yourself outside of your comfort zone, because a lot of these issues really require taking risks, dealing with challenging issues. The world is becoming much more complicated. It's not as easy to travel as it once was. And you need to have some type of field experience, international engagement, working with different communities. And so, not to be afraid to pick up and go somewhere and see where it's going to take you and not have a clear plan. Because in some ways that can be something that will limit those opportunities to be open to new opportunities. So those would be my two recommendations.
Richard, before you jump in, I just want to share an observation from Mark. Mark was saying that networking is a skill and should be studied and practiced. Don't be bashful about connecting with people you think will be useful. When cultivating a network, aim to offer the target of your activity something useful to them. It doesn't have to be much. Maybe an interesting article you read, or an interesting project or case you encountered. That's how it works best. Okay, go ahead, Richard.
I mean, I think that you know, in the 21st century, we are seeing that the environmental challenges are sort of on things like the relationships between natural resources and livelihoods and broader economic forces, which can be very constructive or very lethal, or the increasing frequency of events that are complex and compound, that, you know, droughts set up conditions for fires, and fires, you know, and flooding end up creating huge mudslides. That these sort of challenges have links to conflict and peace that are very important. And today, I think there's a sort of unique opportunity to. We should always do case studies, and that's always a valuable approach. We have a sort of unique opportunity right now to manage big data in ways which was very, very difficult in the past. And to take big data, identify patterns, and develop decision support tools that are really useful to people, that people can trust and understand. We're able to use advanced computational modeling to make things very customized, and to create interfaces that are very user-friendly, that people can co-develop and everybody can participate in and understand. I think these are incredibly powerful, and we're just at the beginning of this. So I think the next few years, we're going to see the sort of the emergence of a much more robust set of tools that are solutions-oriented. I think that the Environmental Peace Building Association will very likely serve as a platform for that. That's going to be a great opportunity for both networking and identifying clusters of activities that people can become directly engaged with, that are interested in these issues. So I think that the association is a great next step for students who are saying, how do I become part of this community? How do I, you know, start to explore the tools that will help us sort of, you know, design and implement more robust solutions in places where the environmental dimensions are of critical importance.
David, I didn't know if you want to jump in on the big data thoughts.
No, I just fully agree with Richard, and just in my own professional development, this is a big priority for me for the next couple of years, is not only helping my branch grapple with big data, AI, and blockchain, but UNEP as a whole. And, you know, what is our role in terms of influencing the governance of planetary data, the application of AI, the application of blockchain? These are transformative technologies, and we need to get a handle on this. And so I find this to be a really exciting area globally, but also in the context of conflict and peace and conflict-affected countries, because in situations where you have low levels of governance, technologies like blockchain can be totally transformative in the way that natural resources are managed, precisely because they don't rely on a single central authority. There's a distributed model, or there's a distributed way of governing the resource, and basically using the blockchain and the consensus model in the blockchain to advance decisions without a central government or with central authority. And this is really interesting. So I think as Eric has said, you know, I think it's great to put yourself out of your comfort zone. Definitely the world of big data, AI, and blockchain is out of my comfort zone, but that excites me, and I'm really passionate about learning about this and figuring out how to apply it.
I'd like to follow on that, because for me, the biggest thing for students is finding what you're passionate about. That you know, all of us, we work on weekends, we work on nights, and we do this because we love this stuff, and it's a whole lot easier to do that when you love this stuff. And so figuring out what you really love. And it's not necessarily environmental security broadly or environmental peace building broadly. It might be certain pieces of it. But thinking about the big context, but really pursuing those passions and not necessarily saying, well, what is my experience? Where have I been? What am I qualified for? But thinking first about what you want to do and then figure out how to get there. And it might be that you find this whole new space that you haven't studied. Well, this is a great chance to come up to speed on that. So I think that finding your passion and then embedding that within the broader community are, I guess, the two things that I would say, because often there are really interesting linkages. Things are not as stovepiped or narrowly disciplined as they were 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, speaking of find your passion, I think the MOOC is a great example of that. I don't know about you, Carl, but for the month we were in reviewing the different drafts, I think I was up at about 5:30 every morning from about 5:30 to 8, doing my reviews and loving every second of it. Just being completely drawn into the material and really wanted to make the absolute best product we could possibly make. And so 5:30 every morning. And I think probably from about 11 o'clock till 12:30 every night, reviewing the drafts and really just trying to make the best product we could. So that's definitely commitment and passion. And I totally agree with you. Find something you're passionate about and jump in.
Maybe if we could shift a little, we were just talking about students. Maybe we could talk about another group that we see a lot of people in the MOOC coming from, young professionals, people who have their degrees and they're just starting out. They might be working in this field, they might be working in a related field, but wondering if you have any thoughts on what are some of the best ways to get experience and to build your skills or your resume. Mark had a couple of thoughts on this. You're saying that if you have significant valuable skills already and want to apply them in this area, for example, with project design, project implementation, monitoring and evaluation, and so forth, then you have two paths. One is to strike out on your own through a startup or your own project. The other is to identify an individual or organization whose work in environmental peace building you admire and offer to help by bringing in your skills. In both cases, Mark says, you should normally be prepared to accept modest impacts and roles. Getting started matters most of all. And he said, if you're still developing those skills, then you have a different choice. One option is to choose skills first and find a way to develop them as strongly as possible. Positions or internships that maximize this skill development will pay off most, even if you aren't in the environmental peace building arena. The other option is to try to develop the skills and substantive environmental peace building skills at the same time. This is harder, but it's not impossible. The biggest payoffs in both cases will be finding opportunities to immerse yourself in a work environment surrounded by reflective, thoughtful, dedicated people and finding useful things to contribute. In such an environment, Mark says, you will learn a lot outside of your narrow work experience. Other thoughts on how young professionals can get experience or advance in this area?
I mean, let me just go back and sort of reiterate what I've found in the research center that I direct is in the last few years, and it's incredibly exciting. We have solved a number of interesting challenges in terms of using big data to model events. And what I've seen happen is the level of agreement between visualizations and reality is getting higher and higher, and it's getting that way very quickly. The ability to combine, very, very high resolution data with big data sets and local knowledge is improving at an incredible rate. It's breathtaking. And as a result, you can really co-develop tools with communities that need to use them at any scale and in a variety of ways. I think people who have that, who can do that, people who are, if you're looking for a set of skills to develop, there's a great need for people who understand how to layer different data sets together, how to bring local knowledge and big data together, how to develop interfaces that make sense to people, that answer the questions that they want answered, that they trust. So I think there's a huge gap in the field right now in terms of the competence and the abilities that are there, and the number of people who can do that effectively. So if I was a young professional, I would think very carefully about modeling, visualization tools, big data, and at least exposing myself to that and saying, is this a pathway that I can be passionate about? Because I think the opportunity there is enormous right now.
Couldn't agree more, Richard. And if anybody has those skills and wants to discuss employment opportunities, please send me an email, because that's exactly the skill set we're looking for. So I couldn't agree more. In the advice I would give is, and this is a bit conservative, so I apologize. If you're just starting out in a professional context and you want to sort of branch into some kind of environmental peace building pilot test, I would say, in a sense, start narrow and start in a manner that aligns with your organization's mandate and where you have a very solid business case to work on this. So don't try to do something overly complex. Don't try and do something at a scale or at an area that's outside of your mandate, because you're going to get a lot of pushback, and probably either the mandate issue will get you or the complexity of the intervention will get you. So small, focused, where there's a good mandate and a very good business case. I think that's where you should start.
And maybe with that is also advertise. Let people know what you're doing. If you have a policy paper or you have a video or something, let us know, and we can share it with the on the Environmental Peace Building Knowledge Platform, and help share the experiences, and that also helps to get you out there so that others might say, oh, this is interesting, let's see where there might be linkages.
Yeah, on that front, I would say don't hesitate sharing your ideas and getting as much feedback as you possibly can from everybody you possibly can. Don't worry about necessarily having your idea taken. The most important thing is that you have an idea and you're trying to put it in motion, and you need feedback on that idea. So definitely seek as much feedback as you can and develop a tough skin. Some people will say it's a terrible idea. Some people will say it's fantastic, and that's probably a good indicator that it's somewhere in between.
So I'm just going to throw in one thing with all of this, and it's not so much about, the new particular technologies and skills that one would need, but it's being even more conservative than David, not forgetting good communication skills and how to tell the story, how to pitch the idea, and it takes different forms these days. So, people are still turning to storytelling and how to talk about a success. We've gotten a lot of questions about solutions, and how we can better convey lessons learned, types successful cases. And there, it's also about, do you create a video? Do you create a short film? Do you write a blog? How do you actually tell that story and being able to communicate well? So don't forget that at the same time we're engaging in big data, writing and communication is still essential to be able to take this large data and make it usable to a wider community.
Can I throw something in on that, Carol? Right now, we're doing a project on communication for the Gates Foundation, which is looking at storytelling through different types of media, virtual reality, short video clips, and so on. And we're basically measuring people's responses about how useful this is and how clear it is, and so on. So if anybody out there would like to participate and answer this set of questions, feel free to contact me, because we're right in the middle of this study right now, and we're inviting feedback from practitioners and academics and students to try and understand, how do you tell stories most effectively about complex sciencey types of things.
Exactly.
I just add as well, whenever I give advice now to different project managers who are setting out on new projects, the first piece of advice is, what's your impact narrative going to look like? and how are you going to collect the data to reinforce that impact narrative. And you need, in a sense, a nested narrative. So you need a narrative for your executive, a 2-line narrative on what was the impact. Then you need an impact narrative for, you know, the director, and the next in line and next in line. And you need to nest those out in greater levels of complexity. And you really need, I mean, you really need to think about what those narratives look like right up front as part of project design. And I think I totally agree with Erica and Richard that effective comms and telling your story is an essential ingredient for any successful project.
And maybe that's one thing, if people don't have those skills, that would be something to be working on developing.
Exactly. Or hiring from the market.
There have been a number of requests or offers as we've been talking. I wonder if maybe we could post on the discussion board, to the extent, like Richard, you said, if anybody's interested in participating, please contact you. Maybe we could provide that contact information on the discussion board.
Absolutely.
The student has asked, would you consider hosting a future course that focuses more primarily on peace-building process and the lessons we have learned regarding solutions and how we can address these challenges? And I want to use that also as maybe a launch point to say that we are planning to run the MOOC a second time. It's looking like it will likely be in spring of 2019, but we're still working through the details. We are really wanting feedback. So there are some things that we can do between now and the next time we run it to improve that, as well as the question of if we have an opportunity to develop another MOOC that focuses on some of the content that David alluded to, the 2/3 of the outline that we're not able to cover in this. Any feedback you have in terms of substance or style, what you liked, we really, really would appreciate as much feedback as you can give us. And with that, maybe open it up for discussions about the next, would we consider a course that focuses more on solutions or how to address these challenges?
Carl, I think when we were designing this course, this was the foundational course, looking at concepts, looking at the big picture, looking at entry points, and providing some solutions. I think our thinking for another course, a 200-level course, was to focus in on different natural resources. So looking first at land, then water, then minerals, forestry, oil, and really deep diving into each resource and looking at conflict and looking at solutions to that conflict at a resource-specific level. I still think that's probably a good idea, is to be resource-specific and to drill down into different toolkits, resource by resource. And then we were thinking perhaps a 300-level course, which would focus more on those processes, those larger processes. What does good mediation look like? What does conflict prevention look like? What does peace building look like? And try to go more into the sort of the political side. But certainly, as Carl said, feedback would be fantastic to understand, what is it that people need and how should we structure different courses going forward.
Erica, Richard, anything to add here?
I mean, I'm not, obviously we need to assess the response to this and what people see as the strengths and weaknesses and what they would like. I would love to see us able to produce some modules through the Environmental Peace Building Association or somewhere else that showcases some of the opportunities in new technologies that are developing to manage big data and to customize it to very particular needs and decision-making sort of opportunities. I would like to see that. I also would like to see a couple of these cases maybe developed further, because in a lot of the cases we focused on some specific things, and in many of them there are many other dimensions which we didn't focus on that are important or that have developed over the years. And so I don't want people to think that Sierra Leone is just about diamonds and land. Lots and lots of other things are going on its coasts and its beaches and the way it's developed since the end of the war, and the same is true with other cases. So I think if we could develop some modules around some of the technology that we're talking about, and maybe grow a couple of the cases so that they become comprehensive, that might be useful. But I think it's feedback is what we need right now.
The one thing, this is just thinking as going, on the go, is a lot of the material that we produced is somewhat bookended by the fact that it was produced to fit these 8 to 10 minute modules. But moving forward, in taking the cases and using the association and the online platform to really think of them as living documents that can be updated with current events, current processes that are taking place. So it becomes much more interactive, because I think that is going to be something that's going to be the most useful down the road, is not just saying, oh, this was a historical moment in time, but really looking at the evolution over time, because these cases continue to evolve, and we have, moments of great optimism, and then we have moments of distress, and really trying to engage at that particular time and thinking about what can we learn at this particular time, and then moving forward. So trying to build a body of knowledge out there that is much more interactive, rather than having the modules just stand out there by themselves. So I think that's one of the challenges moving forward that I would like to see us address.
Can I add one more thing, Carl? Is that I think that in the past few years, we've taken an enormous step forward in deepening, refining, and in many ways modifying what scientists mean when they talk about climate change. And I think we're seeing a lot more of its variation, and a lot more of the ways in which it only makes sense in specific contexts when it's interacting with a bunch of other things. So if you get climate change and certain types of development and certain types of other processes taking shape, you get certain types of outcomes. And I think that it is important to try and make sure that we use this platform that we are developing with everyone to get the sort of the cutting edge of science in areas that are moving very quickly available to people faster than has historically been the case. Because often there's been a sort of a gap between how people doing the research are viewing the problem and how people developing solutions are viewing the problem. And I think we can close that gap now much more effectively than we could 15 or 20 years ago. And I would love to see us work towards, reducing that gap.
We are winding down. I don't know, maybe we could give people a chance to have some final words on both whether it's the MOOC or next steps or getting engaged in the association. Maybe start with you, Richard.
Well, I mean, I think I've talked about the sort of key things that I think we can build on going forward. I'm delighted to be part of this and committed to continuing to be part of it for the rest of my career. So I think that this is crucially important. I think that a group of 10,000 people who potentially are interested in this, who find it relevant to what they're dealing with in 150 countries, who think it's worth their time to learn about what have people already sort of studied and experienced, is a really, really exciting sort of start to what we want to achieve. So I think that this is a set of relationships that make sense worldwide in different ways. It's a set of challenges that people are addressing in all sorts of different ways. The more we can talk, share, learn, the better off we will be, and the more tractable and manageable a lot of these problems will start to become.
Nicely said.
Carl, I see. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I see on the chat window there's a question about recommendations of other courses, and that's definitely something I would say is keep up your learning and try courses that are outside your comfort zone and knowledge area. So there's a fantastic course that Alex Deegan at Duke has developed on Coursera. It's called Innovation and Design for Global Grand Challenges. I've taken the course myself, loved every second of it. And it's one of those courses I think anybody dealing with environment, natural resources, climate change must take. So definitely continue your educational journey and take a few more MOOCs. I think the other point is just take action, take some kind of action, challenge yourself, and move ahead. And really the only way to engage in this field is to find a project. And as I said, start testing out how these theories and tools apply, learning lessons, iterating, and just starting the journey. So I thank everybody that came out. I really thank people that engaged on the online platform and shared their lessons. I think that was such an important part of the course. I went in there so many times and saw such rich stories and all of this exchange of knowledge and experience. And so many times I was like brought to tears, just so happy, but also so moved by so many of the cases. And so I really want to thank everybody for their massive engagement, their commitment, and their interest. And as Richard said, 10,000 people is a huge community of knowledge, experience. And so let's take that to the next level.
I'm going to be brief, just given we're at time, but just to thank everyone for joining us on the MOOC and being part of this journey, and just encouraging those of you that have been involved in the MOOC to send us feedback. Any things that we're missing, things we should be doing moving forward, and just to encourage everyone to join the association so we can continue to build this wealth of knowledge and level of engagement among those who are interested in environmental peace building.
Thank you. And I want to express my sincere appreciation to the core faculty, David, Richard, Erica, and Mark. It has been a real pleasure and an honor to do this with you. And one of the things that I like so much about working the space is a lot of it's the feeling of impact, and this is a new space and all really exciting, really interesting. But the other thing is that the people are amazing. I've worked in different communities, different fields, and the people here, it's a special group. And it's an honor to do this with you guys. So thank you. And thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you online.
And in reality.
And in reality.